broken windows can be replaced, and downed trees can be removed from the streets. But what about the effects of the May 16th tornado that go unseen?
There are a variety of mental health concerns that can arise when someone's experienced a natural disaster like a tornado, right? One of the most common ones you hear people talking about is post-traumatic stress disorder. And although most people who experience a natural disaster like a tornado won't actually develop post-traumatic stress disorder, many will have symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, and that includes a cluster of things.
Dr. Bart Andrews is the Chief Clinical Officer at Behavioral Health Response.
One of those clusters is intrusive thoughts, where you can't get the thoughts out of your mind, you keep reliving the event. Another group is avoidance, avoiding things that are associated with the event, right? Staying away from people, places, things that remind you of the tornado. The third one is an increase in negative cognition, right? This is a sense of loss of positive emotions, increased negativity, loss of interest in people. And then finally, one that is most common that people describe is a hyperarousal, where people just cannot shut down. Their energy level is up, they're anxious, they can't sleep, they're on edge all the time.
So sometimes we see that up to 40% of those who were affected by a traumatic event could actually have PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder.
Dr. Salma Abdalla is an assistant professor at the School of Public Health at Washington University.
And about up to 20% of those who are rescue workers could actually have PTSD, and about 5 to 10% of the general public who was affected by the mass traumatic event, including a natural disaster, but who are not directly affected, could also have PTSD or depression.
She has researched mental health effects of Hurricane Harvey on Houston residents.
And what we found was that 3 years later, about 13% of the population had post-traumatic stress disorder, and about 6% of the population had depression.
She says the May 16th tornado has the potential to lead to years-long issues as well.
We also know that events like this that usually then also are accompanied by a lot of stressors, and what I mean by stressors here are economic stressors. So if you lost your job, we know a lot of businesses were affected, or if you lost your housing, that usually leads to compounding the psychological impact that you have.
The EF3 tornado damaged over 5,000 buildings, including many homes.
There's also something called solastalgia, and that's the loss of your home. And in fact, when there are natural disasters, one of the things that researchers are now finding, and this is a rather new concept, if you lost your home, your dwelling, we tend to see more pronounced symptoms and they last longer.
But there are ways to combat PTSD and other conditions following the disaster.
If there is a swift response that shows people that there is an ability to feel safe, that you can have access to shelter, food, medication if you need to, that usually reduces the possibility that people then can end up with long-term psychological impact. We usually recommend something called psychological first aid, and I usually tell people the way to think about it is it's as if it's emotional CPR, or as if you're giving someone a Band-Aid, because that is what's needed in the moment. It does not replace therapy, but is a helpful way to actually reduce some of the impact.
The state deployed the Missouri Behavioral Health Strike Team in the days after May 16th. The team included volunteer mental health professionals who provided resources to those impacted by the disaster. But even with first aid, some people may be struggling weeks or even months after the event.
For folks that have lost their place of living or having these symptoms, one of the first steps is reaching out and getting help. For instance, calling 988. The clinicians at 988 can help you identify how long this has been going on, how severe it is, and what the next best steps are. Some folks may need to see a professional counselor, right? They may need medication. There are medication treatments, there's therapeutic treatments that are quite effective. If someone is struggling 2 months, 3 months after an event like this, boy, it's a really good idea to reach out and get help.
The hotline is free and confidential, and you can text or call the number. Dr. Andrews also recommends trying active coping strategies.
Some people say, well, I'm just going to go home and play video games because I'm so stressed out. That's not a particularly good coping strategy, right? Now, if I'm really stressed out and maybe I've got to make some phone calls to get some resources lined up, but I'm too stressed out to do that. An active coping strategy is I'm going to play video games for 30 minutes, decompress a little bit, and then when that 30-minute timer goes off, I'm going to make a phone call, right? So that you're building in these baby steps to make progress on the things that you need to do.
It's also important to monitor your news consumption.
Media is helpful. Exposure to the news about a specific event is helpful. But too much exposure actually in our studies have shown to lead to worse mental health outcomes. People who are actually engaged within their communities have better mental health outcomes. So if you can, just be closer to your loved ones, and if you can actually volunteer, weirdly it might not make sense, but even if you're feeling down, the best way we found to actually get better is try to engage with the community and maybe help those who need more help than you.
Currently, the full effect that the tornado has had on our region's mental health is unknown, but Dr. Abdalla hopes to eventually study it.
And just looking at the impact of the tornado on the ground makes me think we're going to see a large mental health burden, and I think that needs to be documented, and hopefully that would direct some of the resources people need, especially in low-income areas that were hit hardest by the tornado. We should just know now from all the literature that we have that this happens, and it should just be baked into any of the responses that the government provides. We're seeing more and more extreme weather events. That means that we're going to have a larger burden of mental health outcomes. We need to be more mindful, increasingly, of the mental health burdens of natural disasters.